taking the story outside the Beltway to two battleground states. Tonight from Denver, Colorado and Madison, Wisconsin, a Washington Week town hall.
This is a Washington Week Election 2012 town hall event, produced in collaboration with Wisconsin Public Television and Rocky Mountain PBS. Funding for this Washington Week Town Hall is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and viewers like you. Thank you. Here again, Washington Week moderator Gwen Eiffel.
Good evening. With about 6 weeks to go before the political nominating conventions and less than 4 months before voters go to the polls, decision time is fast approaching. And although every citizen gets a vote, candidates are lavishing the most attention on an exclusive set of battleground states, swing states from Nevada to Florida. Tonight, we focus on the concerns of voters in two of them, Colorado and Wisconsin, where the Obama and Romney campaigns are flooding the airways with ads and personal visits. So we're joining with Rocky Mountain PBS in Denver and Wisconsin Public Television in Madison for a look at the political landscape in both states. We start with Frederica Freiberg in Madison.
Well, Gwen, Wisconsin emerged from flyover country this summer when all eyes watched this state's recall election of the sitting Republican governor, Scott Walker. Now, the staunchly conservative Governor Walker won that election, keeping his seat. If the recent recall election here for governor was a test drive for the November presidential race, then simple logic would suggest a win for Mitt Romney in this state. But is it that simple? Wisconsin, especially lately, represents a complicated electorate. This is what politics looks like in Wisconsin lately. Loud, angry protests against a Republican governor and his budget cuts and curbs on public union collective bargaining.
Thank you.
But loud and angry didn't translate at the polls. In June, Governor Scott Walker successfully overcame a recall vote that would have removed him from office. A voter mandate for November? Perhaps. But as the recall noise fades into midsummer, there may be an element of voter fatigue heading toward the November election.
Actually, I'm a little tired of the political environment.
With its economic backbone of dairy and manufacturing, Wisconsin has an unemployment rate lower than the national average, but struggles to regain lost jobs. While Wisconsin has not gone Republican in a presidential race since 1984, it's by no means true blue. In keeping with Wisconsin's complicated electorate, even after a statewide Republican recall win, latest presidential polls have Barack Obama leading Mitt Romney by 8 points.
This is Cynthia Hessen in Denver. Colorado is among the new electoral battlegrounds in the presidential election. President Obama has made 7 visits to the state since taking office, including a stop late last month to lend support and sympathy to those caught up in the battle against wildfires. Republican challenger Mitt Romney has been to the state 3 times in as many months, including stops earlier this week to raise money in Aspen and host a town hall in Grand Junction. For both candidates, Latino voters are a key demographic. According to one recent national poll, Romney's approval rating among Hispanics hovers at 26%, well behind the president's 66% approval rating. It's interesting to note the Obama campaign has opened 13 Latinos for Obama offices in Colorado, while the Romney campaign has just 1 office doing outreach to Hispanics. The other key group in this state is the high percentage of unaffiliated voters, more than 676,000 people who are being courted by both the Obama and Romney campaigns. In 2008, those independent voters helped President Obama win Colorado by 9 points. But the state also gave George W. Bush the nod in his 2 presidential races. So, Gwen, Colorado is seen as one of those purple states, not consistently blue or red, whether it's in the presidential races or in choices for Congress and the governor's office.
Thanks, Cynthia. We're also joined here in Washington by 2 Washington Week regulars, Michael Duffy, executive editor and Washington bureau chief for Time magazine, and Beth Reinhardt, political correspondent for National Journal. I want to start by asking you both, how laser focused are the campaigns on states like like Wisconsin and Colorado, and how much are they spreading the wealth around? Beth?
You know, it's extraordinary how much money is being spent in such few places. I think, you know, we're going to see more money than ever on fewer voters than ever. And looking at the battleground states is a good way of looking at it. I think the top 3 states that you're seeing extraordinary amounts spent are Virginia, Ohio, and Florida. Actually, Ohio is number 1. And, you know, Colorado and is not far from the top, I know. Wisconsin's probably a little farther down because it is looking more like an Obama state. But, you know, those are the states where you go and you're seeing ads, you know, all the time. Whereas in the rest of the country, they will probably, you know, may never see a presidential ad this entire season.
Michael?
But even in the states that are in the top 3 or 4, there are so many contested races on the congressional level that those are going to have a sort of presidential impact as well, because every race is going to be well funded this year. Regardless of where it is, there's so much money in the political, fish tank this year. It's just going to be astonishing.
Frederica and Cynthia are with great groups of people both in Madison and in Denver tonight. And I want to start out with you, Frederica, because you're there with Charles Franklin, who's been taking some interesting recent polling on this.
That's absolutely correct. Now, Charles Franklin is a visiting professor of law and public policy at Marquette University. As you say, he conducts the Marquette Law School poll there and founded pollsandvotes.com. So, Charles, this week you had a poll out that showed, again, that President Obama, even after our recall where the Republican won statewide, it showed that President Obama was ahead by 8 points over Mitt Romney. What gives with Wisconsin?
Yeah, the really striking thing is that this state has been competitive, even though Democrats have usually won it. We went twice for Ronald Reagan, but Democrats have won ever since. But 2000, 2004 were extremely close races. Obama's 14-point win in 2008 was exceptional. And then the Republican Revolution of 2010 and the Walker victory shows just how mixed it is. In the same time that our polling was showing the governor being reelected, it was also showing Obama leading by 7 points, and that division is really critical. For us, the issue is going to be, number one, what happens to the 25% of the state in rural areas that have been really the swing vote in the last several elections? And secondly, what about the economy? Those who think the economy is better or worse do what you think they would do. But those who think the economy is really sitting still, those folks are currently leaning to Obama. Can Romney change that, or can Obama hang on to it?
Cynthia Hessen, in Denver, I wonder, you're there with John Strayer, who also might have some thoughts about this. I'm curious about the lay of the land. How does it compare to what we're seeing in Wisconsin?
Well, and John has been a political science professor at Colorado State University up the road in Fort Collins for many, many years. He's also the author of 8 books, the most recent of which is State of Change, taking a look at how political and demographic shifts have happened in Colorado in the 21st century. What do you think this year? Are a lot of people just standing back for the moment?
Well, I think it's a little hard to tell at this point. My overall take on where Colorado is right now is I give Democrats and Obama the edge. It's theirs to lose, but they could very well lose it. I mean, this is a very balanced state, particularly in the last decade or so. 4 of the 5 most recent governors have been Democrats. The 2 sitting U.S. senators are Democrats. But if you look at the registration numbers right now, they favor the Republicans, not by a lot, but they do favor the Republicans. The congressional seats are dominated, the U.S. House seats are dominated by the Republicans. And the Colorado legislature now is split, with the Democrats holding the Senate and the Republicans holding the House. So it's a state where things have moved. It moved from red clearly to purple over the course of this last decade. Polls show Obama right now about 3 points up, and more so in the polls that look at all registered voters rather than the likely voters. So I think the Democrats, it's theirs to lose, but they could very easily lose it. This with 30%, 35% of the voters unaffiliated, and they do move. It's up in the air. Anybody who takes the state for granted is going to wish they hadn't.
You know, the president was traveling in Virginia, and one of the things he said is, if we win Virginia, we'll win the election. There are states, they're saying this on a lot of states around as they travel around. Is it true, Michael? Where are the critical states that they have to win?
If you're the White House.
If you're the White House.
I think they have to win Virginia, Ohio, and either Colorado or Iowa if they can get it. Those are the states that are hard. They need to hold Wisconsin. One of the things they say that they weren't saying last week, Gwen, is they think this race is going to come down to perhaps as many as 3 or 4 million people in about 6 or 7 states. That puts a lot of other people, that many people they think are, that's the number
Everybody
of people.
else can go on vacation.
Well, everyone else has decided who matters. And in the swing states, the undecideds are really very few. That's like 2% of the voting population.
You're hearing it the same way, Beth?
You know, the one thing I wanted to mention was Professor Franklin was talking about unemployment in Wisconsin. It's interesting because we're obviously talking about the economy so much, but there isn't necessarily a correlation in some of these battleground states between high or low unemployment and whether Obama is doing well or poorly. I mean, you have states like Florida and Nevada, which I think are some of the, the highest unemployment and foreclosure that we're seeing in these battleground states, but yet the president's doing well in Nevada. Florida's a lot tighter. Why? Iowa, where unemployment is low, Obama it's a little bit of a tighter race. I think Obama has a little bit of an edge. Virginia, also unemployment low, very tight race.
Well, let's pick the brains of some of the voters we have out in Madison and in Denver tonight. Cynthia, I want to start with you. You're with Melanie Novak, who's one of the voters there, and I'm curious what's on her mind. What are the issues she wishes these candidates were talking about?
Melanie, you're a mother of 2, I know, and for the audience, she works in the financial industry, helping people with their retirement accounts. You voted for John McCain in 2008, but this year you say you're not sure. What issues are going to make up your mind?
Well, basically how they're going to handle the economy, how it's going to affect my family. A lot of promises were made in 2008, and we're still not seeing anything. So do I go with the president and hope for better, or do I go with Mr. Romney and go with the unknown? It's you're unsure.
You and your husband are both employed, but yes. I'll bet you know people who aren't.
Oh yes, and at my job I talk to a lot of people that are cashing out their 401ks and things like that because they've lost their job or they're losing their house. So and I talk to people around the country, and so I see a lot of it. It hasn't affected me luckily yet, but I'm a little nervous as what's coming up.
Nervousness and anxiety seems to be the key everywhere, Cynthia. Frederica, in Wisconsin, you're there with Randy Hellenberg. He also said he voted Helen Brand. I'm sorry, Randy. I hear that you voted also for John McCain 4 years ago.
Yes, I did, and I have. He was the only Republican I voted for at the time. I voted a split ticket and everything else. But I'm voting for Obama now because he's had the courage to go and take on the healthcare industry. Because I have went to clinics and I've been turned away because I didn't have insurance. I was in a hospital one time. They charged me $40 for back then about a $3 tube of Bengay. There's abuses there that have to be rectified. I believe he honestly is the only person that can understand the proper role of government and government's role in guiding the economy since Nixon and FDR.
Now you consider I'm sorry, you consider yourself an independent, but for all intents and purposes, you've made up your mind.
Yes, I have, totally.
I want to go back out to Colorado. Jessica Peck, Cynthia, is there, and I'm curious about what she thinks about all of this.
It's interesting here in Colorado because while we can say this is one of the key states, one of many key states that will hold the keys to the White House this November, there's been a dramatic change since the last election when Barack Obama gave his historic acceptance speech for the Democratic nomination. There's been a 5% increase in the number of registered voters. In addition, when we talk about what Romney's doing versus Obama in terms of outreach to either women or to Latino voters, a lot of what we're seeing isn't necessarily from these campaigns. These are the ground troops. This is sort of the grassroots version of the 527s. These are the people, these are the personalities, this is the passion behind the bigger ground game. So for the Democrats to lose Colorado, maybe it doesn't actually, when we look at the number of electoral votes, make all the difference. But for Democrats to lose this seat, meaning the seat, the sort of capital for the Rocky Mountain Western independent voter, that is significant because this was where President Obama staked his ground in 2008.
Can I ask you a question about that, Jessica? I just want to follow up. I was in Colorado not too long ago doing some reporting on a story about Hispanic voting and Latino voting. And as Cynthia mentioned in her piece earlier, there really wasn't a very big Romney statewide presence. There may have been a lot of excitement going on in Republican circles, but not the Romney campaign. And I wonder if that's not going to put him at a disadvantage in the fall.
There's a real strategy playing out here. When we look at the money, it seems to shift every week after the Obamacare Supreme Court decision. Of course, Romney made millions of dollars in a single day. My perception, and I'm not involved directly in the Romney campaign nor the Obama campaign, but my sense is that Obama is really looking to spend his money early, to secure those voters early, whereas Romney is going to be holding back a little bit, anticipating this voter fatigue that other people have talked about.
Beth?
I was struck by something that Melanie said about, she described Romney as the unknown, which is exactly, plays very well into what Jessica was just saying about the president wanting to spend money now and define Romney on his terms, which, if anyone who's seen the ads, especially this week when they've gone completely negative, Romney is this, ruthless capitalist, put people out of work because his former investment firm had taken over their companies. Folks in other states are seeing ads that suggest he's against abortion in all cases, which he's actually stated he would support exceptions for rape and incest. So exactly, Obama wants to define him so that someone like Melanie, who sees Romney as someone she's not really sure who he is, well, Obama wants to tell you who he is.
Let me go back to Wisconsin, Eduardo de Souza, because I wonder whether that when we talk about all this advertising and all of this trying to define either candidate, whether that's trickling down to you and the folks you talk to.
I think what's really interesting about this particular election, at least in my age group, is that people seem to not be as concerned with the social issues and have become more concerned about economic issues. People are worried after graduation, am I going to have a job? Is this debt sustainable? Can we keep spending on a deficit? So I'm not particularly swayed by the advertising. I'm a huge believer in the market system. I think in the end the markets are really simple, they're predictable in the sense that if you increase something, another effect will occur. Mm-hmm. So I'm voting mostly on that. Which policies do I see as more economically sound?
Do you feel like you get Romney, who you would theoretically vote for?
I feel like I understand him. I think that, especially as a member of college Republicans, we are often painted as ruthless, unfeeling capitalists. I obviously sympathize. I'm pre-med. I obviously sympathize with a colleague here who got turned away at a clinic. But oftentimes, it's not so much it's not so much we want to hurt people. It's more so, well, can we spend money on these things? Can we sustain a universal healthcare system for over 300 million Americans? It's extremely expensive, and we also kind of passed it through legislation really fast and didn't really think about it. And I guess when I see government involvement, I just kind of see it as is this the old lady who swallowed a fly? Are we taking a problem and chasing it with a spider and then chasing it with something else, and are we going to create bigger problems?
Pardon me, I just want to ask Michael to weigh in on that, because I think you're speaking to a concern that we keep hearing echoing back at us here in Washington.
You know, Wisconsin is a special state in American politics this year because it's had I don't want to call it a reawakening, that would be unfair, but it's had a period of activism and intensity that is, it lasted at least 6 months. I'm not sure any state could have sustained it all the way through November, but what I love about what happened in Wisconsin is exactly what has the debate that's been going on in Washington. How much does a public spend on itself? How big can government get? How much can we afford? What steps can we take to curtail it? I mean, a few other states followed Wisconsin after they went first this year. I think in some ways, just as Colorado had this great activist moment following the convention in 2008, which very much worked for Obama's sake, no state will be more interesting this year than what happens in Wisconsin, even with the polls being the way they are.
Let's stay in Wisconsin with John Rosenow, who is a counterpoint, I guess, in some ways to Eduardo, because he's a dairy farmer, an Obama supporter. Do you have the same kind of sense that maybe people are talking past you?
Well, I guess I'm very frustrated with the whole political process, because what seems to be happening is we have very qualified people in government, in our politicians. They're not dummies, but we have an electorate that allows them to vote on polls. Whatever the poll is going, that's the decision they make, rather than making intelligent decisions. There's lots of issues that are very, very complicated, and everybody out here has an opinion, and it may not be a very good opinion, but it's an opinion. And the politician then listens to that and makes a decision on that, rather than what is the right decision based on the facts. And that's so frustrating.
Tim Sandos in Colorado, are you frustrated too, or are you more optimistic than that?
Well, I think people see similar frustrations, in particular with the Latino community. Part of the frustration are the issues that are really important to Latinos, which are the economy, jobs, educational attainment, and health care. Most people see Latinos as being concerned about immigration, and in the West, while that's true, what people are concerned and frustrated about are their access to those four major issues. Latinos have been directly impacted by job loss with the economy. There was a substantial impact to Hispanic families when it came to home ownership and foreclosure rates. And so the losses of those things, without any apparent way to come back and help to stabilize our community, has created great frustration with the Hispanic community. And then specifically, the apparent inaction of Congress and of the White House on immigration reform until of late has created another frustration for the Hispanic community.
Charles Franklin in Wisconsin, what are those issues that are driving this in the end that may shift everything as we enter this final stage?
I think the economy is first, for the obvious reason that it can change and it's very relevant to everyone. Voter turnout is the other huge thing. Both campaigns are very active here on the ground, though I think the Obama campaign got a lead on that. And then this issue of the size of government and how do you control it, which Governor Walker has now been very successful within the state staking out a side. But President Obama still leads in the polling here, showing that voters are not ready to reject him just because they embrace Walker's concerns about the size of government.
John Strayer in Colorado, are you hearing the same kinds of things?
I've got the sense that the economy as a big issue is not necessarily going to be the only issue. Tim talked about the concern that the Latino community has. I think that's very important. There have been efforts in our legislature to make it more affordable for students to undocumented students to attend colleges and universities. That's become an issue, and I think there's some focus on that. The Latino community now is 21% of the population is Latino, and there has been some increase in a very slight increase in voter registration in the handful of counties where most of the Latinos reside. So I think that's going to be an issue. Immigration is an issue. Access to schools for Latino students is an issue. The undocumented is an issue. And yes, the economy is an issue, no question about it. To some extent, so is energy. We're getting a lot of drilling out here for oil, natural gas, and that's going to be an issue as well. The whole fracking thing is going to be an issue too.
Yeah, we hear both candidates talk about both of those. Frederica and Cynthia, I want you to kind of wrap it up at the end by giving us a sense of what, as you talk to people, as you talk to voters, what are the things which are going to shift you from battleground status one way or the other, you think, in the next couple of months? First, Fred?
If I were Charles Franklin, I might be better able to answer that, but I will suggest that I think that here in Wisconsin, we have heard in the field while interviewing people and really just at home and in the neighborhood that people are not quite ready to embrace this presidential election yet. The recall election was so extremely bruising here in Wisconsin, and the sides became so polarized that people are almost kind of taking a little summer hiatus here, and at a certain point we'll get into this presidential election in a big way. We were just discussing that actually Wisconsin airwaves are not inundated with these presidential campaign commercials yet, and so I think the economy will be key here in Wisconsin going forward, but again, we're not yet ready to go there.
Cynthia, not inundated yet in Colorado?
Well, we are a little bit inundated with ads so far. We're already seeing a lot of those for both presidential campaigns. Let me ask Tim Sandos to make a very short comment here. He was following on what John said earlier.
Well, John made the point of the number of people who are now registering to vote in Latino communities. Those are largely younger people who are 18 to 29. In America, 50,000 people turn 18 years old in the Hispanic community every month. So the numbers that John spoke about that are registering to vote and indeed are going to turn out to vote, I think are going to be significant in the difference of what we see here.
And as always, turnout is pretty key.
Some stats that I saw from 2000 to 2010, that 10-year period, up to the last census, 42% of all the new births in Colorado were Latino.
Thank you, John Strayer and Tim Sandos.
Thank you so much, and I want to wind up here a little bit with Michael and Beth. I wonder as you go forward whether you listen to what these folks are saying in these two battleground states and you think they have the work cut out from these candidates.
I was thinking that as we heard about the key issues in both states, those don't line up for one party or the other, for one candidate or the other. You can see why this is going to be close right down to the wire, because whether it's energy or immigration or the economy, you know, both sides have strong arguments about how to go forward, and it doesn't really favor one or the other yet. So I think we'll see that right on through, and I think both campaigns expect this to go right to the end.
Right, Beth?
I was thinking about what Frederica was saying in Wisconsin about voters not quite being ready to engage because they've been through such a brutal recall election, but I think that's probably, maybe to a lesser degree, but also true of voters in the other battleground states and throughout the country. The number of undecided voters is very small, and I think it'll take those folks a while to really get engaged. You know, we'll have the Olympics, and then, you know, we'll have the debates, and those could be turning points, and I think they're going to probably hold out until the end.
And meanwhile, we in Washington will keep exasperating you out there in Colorado and Wisconsin by talking about everything except the things that you say matters. But we're going to try to stay focused and try to stay on topic for all of you. Thank you, everybody, for a fascinating discussion about some important topics. Thank you to Michael Duffy and Beth Reinhardt here in Washington, and especially to our partners Frederica Freiberg at Wisconsin Public Television and Cynthia Hessen at Rocky Mountain PBS in Denver. And if you're watching us online, be sure to stick around and see what else we have to offer on our website, including links to the stories our panelists are writing and editing. And we'll see you next week on Washington Week. I'm Gwen Eiffel. Good night.
Funding for this Washington Week Town Hall is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and viewers like you. Thank you.
Trusted, in-depth, independent. PBS.